I am curious to know how these attempts to end your life were perceived. You mentioned 3 of them, all of which were intended to be hanging, but I never got to that point. I imagined you tried to hang yourself, and I got to buy the rope. I imagined I'd find a place to do it, but I didn't get to do it. I didn't get to do anything like that. I even tied the rope, but I didn't use it. I had the rope, though. I had all this in my mind. The thoughts were very real, and that's why I think the psychiatrist wanted me to stay. I had a lot of thoughts about ending my life, but I never actually tried to do it. I imagined it, but I never actually got the rope or anything like that. I didn't end up doing anything. I didn't even tie the rope. I had all these thoughts, but I didn't act on any of them. I had a lot of these thoughts, and they were very real, which is why the psychiatrist wanted me to stay in the hospital. I knew I didn't even know when I was a friend of his cousin. We knew each other since we were very young. We were both in the same club group as soon as we were in high school. We were both in the same club. We started dating when I was 16. He broke up with me when I was 19. I was 16, and everyone was 16, too. I was in the hospital, and I didn't even know when I became friends with his cousin. We were very close when we were teenagers, around 12 or 13 years old. We were in the same club, and everyone in the city was in the same group. When I was 16, we started dating. He had broken up with me a while back, and I was 19. Everyone was against it, because he was a jealous, arrogant person who didn't have much empathy. Everyone spoke, but he was different. He pulled me away from my friends at that time. He went away, and I didn't have anyone like that. I just went out with him. He took me out looking for me. I didn't go anywhere. I had a friend who was a lot like that, but she was. People say that the people my friends didn't like it, because he was a difficult person to get along with. He was kind of arrogant, and he didn't have much empathy. Everyone spoke, but he was the only one who spoke to me. He pulled me away from my friends at that time, and he went away. No one was like that. I just went out with him. He took me out and looked for me. I didn't go anywhere. I had a friend who was a lot like him, but she was a friend of the day. We never went out, and our class was different. I could maintain this friendship, but then the dating was like this when I was 17. When I went out, I was a little older. I am from the interior of Minas. I moved to Belo Horizonte to go to college. I went to college, psychology, and then things started to get quite strange. He started to get too jealous, so I spent all the time I could. We were friends, but we never really dated. When I was 17, I started dating this guy, and then, when I turned 18, I moved to Belo Horizonte to go to college. I studied psychology, and things started to get a little strange. He was very jealous, so I spent all my time on the phone with him. I spent all my money that year, 2000, so the phone was very expensive. I spent all the money, I had to stay with him on the phone. Then, in the middle of college, it happened. We ended up leaving. I wanted to leave. I didn't even care about other people with other men. I just wanted to break free from that relationship that controlled me all the time. I saw my friend leaving. I was studying with him on the phone, and I spent all my money in the year 2000. The phone was very expensive, and I spent all the money, I had to stay with him on the phone. Then, in the middle of college, it arrived. I wanted to leave, but I didn't want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to be free from that relationship that controlled me all the time. I saw my friend leaving, having other experiences, and I wanted to end it. It lasted for months, about 6, 7, or 8 months. Then, he started a relationship with someone else, and many people came to me, his family, and his friends, talking about it. I was jealous, of course. So, the situation got worse. I was afraid of being in a relationship, because I was afraid of him having another person. I had some other experiences, and I wanted to put an end to it. It took a few months, maybe 6, 7, or 8 months. By that time, he was dating someone else. When he started dating, a lot of people came to me and his family and friends, and everyone started talking. I felt jealous, and that's when things got complicated. I was afraid of staying in a relationship, because I was afraid of him having another person. I was very insecure, and he was always very insecure. A few months later, I got pregnant. I gave birth to my daughter in April, and I finished college in June. I wish I had followed an academic career. It was the most frustrating thing for me, and I wanted to have a doctorate. I don't know what I want to do now. I could have done it, but I didn't. I couldn't handle being alone in Belo Horizonte with the baby. He never took responsibility for anything related to my daughter. She was born with a heart problem, and she still has it. She's 19 now, and it was very scary at first. When the doctor told me she had 7 days, I thought the world had ended. I was alone, and I went. I had to come back, and I'm so grateful that I did. I wouldn't have been able to handle being alone in Belo Horizonte with the baby, and he wasn't around to help me with anything. My daughter was born with a heart problem, and she's still dealing with it today. She's 19 now, and it was really scary when the doctor told me she had 7 days. I thought the world was ending, and I was alone. I went to all the prenatal consultations alone, all the ultrasounds alone, and all the exams alone, because I also had something to support you. You know that he wasn't going to accept another company, and I did everything by myself. I did everything with my daughter, and I say it's just mine, like this. I get emotional a little. On the day she was born, it was the night before in Belo Horizonte. I had a slightly high blood pressure, and I arrived at the office just as she was about to be born. I went to all prenatal appointments, all ultrasound appointments, and all exams by myself. I did everything on my own, and I did it for you. I knew he wouldn't accept another company, so I did everything by myself. Me and this daughter, we're like this. I get emotional, you know. On the day she was born, it was the day before Belo Horizonte. I had a slightly elevated blood pressure. I arrived at the office, and she was almost born. I didn't feel anything. I was already 6 centimeters dilated. He went straight to the hospital, and the delivery didn't happen on time. He and his mother went, and when they went downstairs for a coffee, his mother told me that he couldn't help in anything with that child, because he was responsible for his brothers and for her. He had other commitments, so he never bought anything for her, whether it was milk or diapers. I didn't feel anything. I was already 6 centimeters dilated, but the birth didn't go as planned. My father went to the hospital, but he didn't make the normal delivery. My daughter was born, and he and his mother went with us. While they were there, his mother told me that he couldn't help with anything, because he was responsible for his brothers and for her. He had other commitments, so he never bought anything for her, such as milk or diapers. He also never made any appointments with cardiologists. It was an apparent sign of a very serious problem. My daughter was underweight, and the doctor said that if she didn't put on weight, she would have to have surgery. If she had pneumonia, she would have to have surgery. We stayed with her, and she didn't take a breath. I was very involved in the situation, and we fought very much. Everything was very intense, and we couldn't enter Dringalu. I was really worried about her, and I thought it was important to let her know that I was there for her. She was underweight, and the doctor said that if she didn't gain weight, she would need to have surgery. If she had pneumonia, she would need to have surgery as well. I was really invested in her well-being, and we had some tough conversations. At one point, we couldn't agree on a plan, so we had to separate for a while. When we reunited, I was able to combine our lives again. My brother and my mother came to visit, and I was overwhelmed. One day, my father said to me, "For God's sake, stop crying. I can't handle it." He was trying to comfort me, but it was hard for me to see him so upset. When my daughter was 1 year old, we got married. On the eve of the wedding, we had a deal, but when we were together, I would make plans and he would go home and come back. I was worried about my brother and my mother, and one day, I cried to my father. He told me, "Stop crying. I can handle you. I can handle you more. I can handle you seeing you cry." So, when my daughter was 1 year old, we got married. On the eve of the wedding, my father told me, "You don't need to get married. No one is forcing you to marry if you're not sure. I see that you're a little lost," but I said no. I was ashamed. I dated him for 16 years. And then I was ashamed to be a single mother and a married woman, even knowing that that didn't make me happy. But I thought I was going to make my daughter happy by giving her this family that didn't. I let her know that I didn't think marriage was right for me at the time. I wasn't sure if I wanted to get married, and I was worried that it might not make me happy. I thought that if I got married, it would make my daughter happy, but that didn't happen. Right after the wedding, he said that a friend had lent us an apartment for a few days. When we arrived, the apartment was in bad shape. It was dirty and everything was falling apart. The beds were supported by cans. I told him I wouldn't be there with my daughter, but he insisted. He always used the argument that I was on medication, and that I was being difficult. He said that he liked me, but he didn't want to marry me. It's clear that things didn't work out between us. Right after the honeymoon, he said that a friend lent us an apartment for a few days. When we arrived, the apartment was in poor condition. Everything was cheap and worn out. The beds were supported by cans. I said I wouldn't be there with my daughter, but he insisted. He always used the argument that I was on medication and very stubborn. He said, "You want to go to a 5-star hotel. I'll do what I can to provide for you, but you never make it good." Then we spent the day on the beach, and we left her playing near her. We didn't argue like that. When we came home, I said, "There is no condition I don't. I'm going to sleep with my daughter here." Then people got into the car, and he came dozing. We almost had an accident about 10 times on the road. We're going to a fancy hotel, I'm doing my best. I'm always there for you, and you're always there for me. We spent the day on the beach, talking about our lives. We didn't fight like that, and when we got home, I said, "There's no condition I won't try. I'm going to sleep with my daughter here." Then, we almost had an accident about 10 times on the way home. We got home at 5:06 a.m., and I slept the whole trip. I dozed in some moments, and I was scared. I don't think even my parents know this history. I think they'll know if they watch this video, because I was afraid. I felt ashamed. I was terrified. Then, our marriage was never good. We had a few good days when I was just me, and he was just me. He was a phallus, that is, I had a hard time sleeping on the trip, but I'm glad I made it home. I did so off a few times, and it was scary. I'm not sure if my parents know about this, but I think they'll find out if they watch this video. I was afraid and ashamed. Our marriage was difficult after that. We had a few good days when I was just with him, but he was a very difficult person. I think he was still when he died. A year later, my father helped me move to another city. I was alone with my daughter, who was almost 3 years old, and I stayed there. I started working, and I was happy to be financially independent. I think that's what saved me. I never gave up on college, and I never stopped working. I owe a lot to my he has a disease, and I think that still affects him. A year later, my father gave me a job in another city, so I moved there. At first, I was alone with my daughter, who is almost 3 years old. I started working, and I was financially stable. I think this was what saved me. I never gave up on college, and I never stopped working. I owe a lot to my father and my mother, but my father was the one who spoke like that. He was the one who charged this. He was the one who controlled me even more. I worked all day, and I had a maid, a nanny, and my daughter Divan to school. But he said that I was ashamed to take her to a city of 30,000 inhabitants. My father was quite the character. He was always on the go, going to work, going to the city, and taking my mother with him. He was so busy that he didn't even have time to take care of me. I was working all day, taking care of a maid, a nanny, and my daughter, Divan, who was in school. It was a lot for him to handle. He felt embarrassed about taking Divan to school, because he thought people would think badly of him. I was so sick and tired of it all. I tried to commit suicide 3 times, but I didn't quite make it. One day, I wrote all these thoughts down in a notebook. I put it in my drawer, and Shova, my secretary, found it. She was such a great help to me. One day, she took some notes. I was in school, and people were thinking of him. Then I went to where he was taking them all. My people, from whom I lived, and I was staying sick. I had 3 attempts at not very realistic suicide, but almost. Then one day, it was very difficult. I wrote this in a notebook on the leaves, and Shova in my drawer in my clinical office. I had a very good secretary, Trill. I say she saved me. One day, she took some notes of mine and my best friend, who is always kept. She called there every morning at my time service intervals, and she played with my secretary, Dona Enkrenka. Then she said I was very angry. Then this secretary of mine knew her. She called, she read my notes, and then she went to where I lived. She lived 70 kilometers away. As far as I live today, she has arrived there. Then I was the nanny, and my dear friend called every morning at the same time, and she played with my secretary, Dona Enkrenka Ta. She said I was very angry, and then my secretary knew her. She called, read my notes, and then went to where I lived, 70 kilometers away. As far as I know, she has arrived there. I was the nanny, and my daughter, and she entered the room and spoke to him. She always looks so strong. I don't even know what word to describe her like this. She looks a lot stronger, always right. I think she is still stronger when it comes to defending me. So I see it in her. She spoke to him, I am going to enter this room with Louis now. While I don't know what's happening inside this house, I won't go out, and if you knock on that. My daughter and I entered the room and spoke to him. She always looks so strong. I don't even know what word to use to describe her. She always looks so strong, but I think she is even stronger when it comes to defending me. I can see it in her. She spoke to him, saying, I am going to enter this room with Louis now. While I don't know what's happening inside this house, I won't go out, and if you knock on that door, you will find the biggest problem of your life. Then we entered the room. She spoke to him, saying, he turns with the nanny, with Lena, with whom you want to do what you want today. You will solve everything alone, because today I will discover what is happening there. We entered the pro room, which was my room. Sway said, can I tell you? I'm here to know. Anna Jewel called me and told me what she read. I'm terrified, I already am. You'll find the biggest problem of your life. Then we entered the room where she spoke to the nanny with Lena, with whom you want to do what you want today. You'll solve everything alone, because today I'll discover what's happening there. We entered the pro room, which was my room. She said, I'm here to know. Anna called me and told me what she read. I'm terrified. I already am. I don't want anyone to see why I don't want you to be exposed in this way. I don't want anyone to use this against you, but I want to find out. I want to know what's going on there. I told her I was angry, because she said you are sick. You need to go to the doctor, or a psychologist. She fought with him, saying that you are not taking care of her, and that you want her disease. Then she called my mother and told everything. I felt uneasy about the situation, and I let her know that I was worried about her. I told her that I didn't think it was fair for her to be in such a vulnerable position. I was upset, because she said you were sick and needed to see a doctor or psychologist. She said you weren't taking care of her, and that you wanted her disease. Then, she called my mother and told her everything. My parents decided to take me to a psychiatrist in Belo Horizonte. I had a very good experience with my ex-psychologist when I was in college. They wanted to hospitalize me because I was depressed. My father asked them not to because I had a young daughter. He said he would blame me if I was hospitalized. The psychiatrist spoke to him, and he said that she couldn't stay alone, even with her husband. To my mother, and then the things that happened. My parents took me to a psychiatrist in Belo Horizonte, my ex-psychologist. When I went to college, I liked it a lot, and they wanted to hospitalize me for depression. My father asked them not to, because I had a young daughter, and he would blame her. Then the psychiatrist spoke to him, saying that she couldn't stay alone, even with her husband. If not, we would all be at risk. Then my mother was like, as if I was going to live in my house. My sister is younger, and at that time, she took dengue very seriously. That's how my mother was in my house. She went to my house, lived in a huge house, and then one day, I left work. I went to do nails, and it was a Thursday. I remember. My daughter was already 4 years old. My mother and I were not risking a lot, but my sister was. I was going to live in my house, and my sister was younger. She took dengue very seriously. That's how my mother was in my house. She lived in a huge house, and then one day, I left work. I went to get my nails done. It was a Thursday. I remember that my daughter was already 4 years old. I went to get my nails done, and my phone battery died. Then, her daughter arrived, running there. I had even finished my nails and was talking, because a manicurist, I was married to my mother's cousin. We were friends. We had stayed after I moved to this city, where I opened my company. She got there terrified, and he assaulted my sister. I didn't know exactly what had happened. I ran home. My sister was in the hospital for a body examination and he was tidying up his things to leave. But I don't believe he thought I was going to leave him. He had already done this again, and then I did nothing. I sat in the room, not knowing what to think, or how to process everything that had happened. I was sitting, apathetic. I didn't have a reaction. He left, era. He didn't work. I took the R400 at the time I had in my wallet, and I gave him the R400 that I had on me, and he left. Then, when my daughter was 9, my current husband went to my parents' home for the first time. He asked to spend the day with her, and it was the eve of Children's Day. She didn't speak at all, she had no voice. Then, he stayed home with her that Saturday, because she had a fever. That week, there was class on the 12th at 3:15 p.m. I gave him the hand and he left. Then, when my daughter was 9 years old, my current husband came to my parents' city for the first time. He asked to spend the day with her, which was the eve of Children's Day. She didn't speak at all, she had no voice. Then, he stayed to have a fever on Saturday. That week, there was class on the 12th, which was a Sunday. The 15th was the age 15 week, and she wouldn't have class there. My mother asked him, leaves her here with me this week, and come and go because it's not too far to work. He said, I'll come and go because here her pediatrician is, and I get home. You end up getting out all day. I left, and she had a fever. Her fever only increased on Wednesday. My mother found her passed out in the bathroom. On the 12th day, which was a Sunday, the 15-week-old was in the midst of a week-long stay with me. My mother kindly offered to take care of her, saying, I'll just leave her here with me this week, and she can come and go as she pleases, since it's not too far to work. Fortunately, her pediatrician was here, so I was able to take care of most things at home. On Wednesday, my mother found her unresponsive in the bathroom, and it turned out she had a fever. They called it croup, a bacterial infection that affects the throat. She was unable to speak, but by Thursday, the pediatrician had switched her antibiotic, and her condition started improving. On Friday, I went to my many commitments, and by that night, she was already feeling a bit better. I stayed with her, and by Saturday morning, she was doing a little better. I went to get my nails done, and when I returned, I told her that I would go to the salon with her. She had a bout of diphtheria today, which is a bacterial infection that can cause a sore throat. She was unable to speak, but by Thursday, her voice had returned. The pediatrician switched her antibiotic, and her condition started improving. On Friday night, I went to my scheduled appointments and was able to stay with her. She was already feeling a bit better. Then, I went to get my nails done, and I told her that I would go with her to the salon. It was a place that my mother's cousin owned, and I said, they're in Marcio, let's just go out for a little while. You're at home the whole week, and you're feeling better now. We went, and I got my nails done. She spoke to me, saying, you can give me a book. There's a book fair in the main square of the city, and I want a book. I said, let's go see. Then, I said, I want the Book of Magic. It was a hall that belonged to a cousin of my mother's, and I said, let's go out for a bit. You're at home all week, and you're better there. We went, and I made the nail. She spoke, Mother, you can give me a book. There's a book fair in the main square of the city, and I wanted a book. I said, let's go see. Then I said, I want the Book of Magic. It cost 20 rupees, and I spoke to her, so I didn't. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. I spoke to her, saying, there's a book fair. Girl, you stayed sick the whole week at home. She said, Mother. I came here with my father on Saturday, and with his girlfriend's niece. She won several books, and I want a lot of this book, but he said he didn't. The book cost 20 rupees, and I spoke to her. At the time, I didn't understand what was happening. I asked her, how's the book fair going for you? You stayed sick the whole week at home, didn't you? She said, Mother, I came here with my father on Saturday, and with his girlfriend's niece. She won several books, and I want a lot of them, but he said he didn't have the money to give me that one. My record fell, and someone happened to return sick, and I talked to her. I bought the book. I talked to her on the way home, and she said, how was the rest of the day, right? I didn't tell her that my father spoke to her, saying that I was very silly, that I was afraid of dogs, and that I couldn't get silly just like her, because of my fear of dogs. Then people came here. I'm so grateful for the money you gave me. I was worried about my record falling, but luckily, someone came to my rescue. I talked to her, and she came home. How was your day? You didn't tell me she spoke to my father, saying I'm very silly and afraid of dogs. I'm really scared of dogs, and I couldn't get silly like you, because of my fear of dogs. Then, people came here, buy the books for his girlfriend's niece. I stayed in the area with her dog, because I needed to lose my fear. I had a lot of fear, and then I was crazy. Then, I saw that the divorce wouldn't end. I never had the feeling that my divorce would never end, that I would never pass, because he continued. He never acted like a father towards me after the divorce. Then, from then on, I bought the books for his girlfriend's niece, because I was struggling with fear. I felt so scared, and I was so lost. I thought that if I didn't get a divorce, I'd never be free. But he never acted like a father to me after the divorce. I wanted to fight for my family. My parents told me to call a lawyer, and he said, talking about justice very sincerely protects women and children. If you open a lawsuit against him, he will go out with a visit. He never asked to be with Lena, and he never wanted to be with her. He doesn't show up for our family very often, but when he does, it's like he's been gone for months. My experience adds every time he appears. Today, I have 3 clinics instead of 1. I'm married. I was single for 5 years. I say I just had 2 boyfriends in my life, and the 2 I married. I got married again in 2016. I have a son from this second marriage, and my daughter from my first marriage is 19. We live in a very happy home, but we have obvious problems. I've been doing therapy for 15 years, since before my separation. I'm a psychologist, so I'm a psychoanalyst. I got married at 50, and I had 2 boyfriends in my life. I got married again in 2016. I have a son from this second marriage, and my daughter is 19. We live in a very happy home, but we have obvious problems. I've been doing therapy for 15 years, since before my separation. I'm a psychologist, so I'm a psychoanalyst. I've had a good marriage, and I've had a healthy relationship with problems like everyone does. I had another son in 2018. My daughter didn't have to have heart surgery, and she still has follow-ups today. She's in college in Brasilia, studying to become a faculty member. She dreams of having international relationships. She and my current husband went to the forum regularly to work on her effective ADE. It has his last name, and I'm so happy to share that my wedding was a beautiful celebration of love and commitment. Like many couples, we faced challenges, but with time and understanding, we navigated them and strengthened our bond. In 2018, we were blessed with the arrival of another son, and in 2023, my daughter underwent heart surgery. She's doing well and continues to follow her medical appointments. She's currently pursuing her dreams at a university in Brasilia, majoring in international relations. A month ago, she and my current husband attended a forum to address emotional needs. They've developed a beautiful relationship, and although it was initially challenging, they've learned to support each other. I understand her perspective and appreciate the importance of recognizing his role as a father, especially since she doesn't have her own father. My life has its share of challenges, but I'm grateful for the progress I've made. I'm no longer consumed by despair, pain, or a desire to escape. I'm living a life full of love, laughter, and connection,